I know what you're planning, and it won't work." That was the message that hit me like a cold draft through an open window. I was in my kitchen, Eleanor Hayes, 67, arranging the breakfast plates with meticulous care, sunlight cutting through the blinds and landing in neat stripes across the oak floor. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of toasted bread, ordinary, comforting, familiar, but beneath the calm surface, my mind was already racing. I had seen the small clues, the way Rebecca, my daughter-in-law, moved through the house with a slightly exaggerated ease, her laughter just a touch too loud, her eyes flickering at moments she thought I wasn't noticing. And Daniel, my son, who had always been careful not to cross my boundaries, had slipped. A forgotten document, a misdirected glance at his phone, all small things that collectively whispered truths I had suspected for weeks. I carried the plates to the table, placing them precisely, aligning the silverware with exact spacing, lighting the candles for effect though it was only breakfast, a gesture of routine rather than celebration. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the steam curling in the early morning light, and sipped slowly, tasting the bitterness that felt appropriate, matching the tension in the air. Outside, the garden was waking up, dew on the grass catching the sun, normality continuing unaware of the scheming within the house. I had spent the last 45 minutes moving about with the practiced grace of someone who had lived long enough to notice patterns and anticipate outcomes. Each drawer I opened, each surface I wiped, each motion had its underlying rhythm, a dance that concealed observation beneath normalcy. My thoughts traced back to the subtle signs of manipulation over the past few months, the small comments about expenses, the offhand remarks about legacy and inheritance, the way Rebecca had suddenly become unusually interested in Daniel's work schedule. I remembered moments when she lingered near the desk, pretending to adjust something, and Daniel's polite, distracted smile as he handed her papers he didn't realize revealed more than intended. I set down my coffee, letting it cool slightly, and stared at the sunlight streaking across the counter. I allowed myself a measured breath, a momentary pause, letting the realization settle fully. They thought I would panic. They thought I would plead. They assumed the calm of age meant compliance. But age had brought clarity, not weakness. My hands, though lined and marked by years, moved with precision as I retrieved a notebook, a collection of evidence carefully compiled, receipts, notes, observations, all inconspicuous yet powerful. The house felt too quiet now, each creak and hum accentuating the stillness, each sound carrying the weight of anticipation. I imagined the confrontation, the moment when the subtle buildup of attention to detail would shift the balance, the moment when patience, observation, and preparation would speak louder than any shout or accusation. I let the aroma of the coffee and toast ground me, but my mind danced ahead, planning the quiet unmasking, the reveal that would leave them startled, unprepared for the calm force they had underestimated. Breakfast continued as usual, Daniel reading the newspaper, Rebecca chatting idly, unaware that each gesture, each word, each expression was catalogued, analyzed, and would later contribute to the tapestry of their revelation. I smiled lightly to myself, not a smile of warmth, but of composed intent, knowing that every small step I took now, every carefully measured action, would culminate in a moment that demonstrated the power of restraint and intelligence, the quiet force of someone who understood that preparation is the most potent response to betrayal. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of birds outside the window. Eleanor Hayes moved through the living room with deliberate calm, straightening cushions on the sofa, adjusting the light in the room to create the appearance of normalcy, every movement measured yet unremarkable. She opened the blinds wider, letting the morning sunlight stream in, illuminating the hardwood floor and casting long, clean lines across the area rug. On the kitchen counter, she had placed a small stack of letters, receipts, and notes, each carefully organized, but outwardly they looked like ordinary correspondence, part of the household routine. Eleanor poured herself another cup of coffee, the dark liquid steaming gently, filling the air with its familiar scent, and took a slow sip, letting the warmth anchor her in the moment. She moved to the window overlooking the backyard, noting the garden in its spring bloom, the tulips standing tall, the dewdrops catching the light, like tiny prisms. It was a peaceful scene, but Eleanor's mind was alert, piecing together the small patterns she had observed over the last several weeks, subtle signs of manipulation and inconsistency that she had cataloged without raising suspicion. Each glance from Rebecca, each distracted smile from Daniel, each misplaced item in the house, now made sense in the context of her quiet investigation. Eleanor had walked these floors many times before, but today every step carried weight, every sound felt significant, as if the house itself was participating in her strategy. She prepared a simple breakfast, arranging the plates and silverware with precise alignment, lighting the candles even though the sun was already bright, the ritual of setting the table giving her a sense of control and focus. The ticking of the clock on the wall marked the passage of time steadily, a metronome against which Eleanor timed her thoughts and actions. She allowed herself to reflect on past gatherings, moments when she had trusted implicitly, providing care and attention to her family without question, and how those gestures had been quietly taken for granted. The realization fueled a composed determination within her, a plan forming in her mind that required patience and restraint, a strategy built on observation rather than confrontation. Eleanor moved through the home methodically, checking the alignment of picture frames, the positions of chairs, and the subtle cues that might reveal the intentions of those around her. She noted every detail, internalizing it, storing it away, letting the ordinary facade of domestic routine conceal the extraordinary clarity of her awareness. As she placed a folded napkin beside each plate, her movements calm and deliberate, Eleanor considered how the morning would unfold, how conversations and actions would be interpreted, how she could maintain her composure while ensuring that every moment was aligned with the outcome she envisioned. The sun continued to rise, filling the rooms with light and shadows, while Eleanor sat at the head of the table for a moment, sipping her coffee, eyes scanning the room, the quiet intensity of her focus making the ordinary house feel charged with anticipation. Every element, from the placement of silverware to the subtle positioning of chairs, was part of a larger plan, each seemingly mundane detail serving as a piece of the puzzle Eleanor had been assembling carefully. She breathed evenly, heart steady, mind sharp, prepared to navigate the day with the precision and patience that age and experience had taught her, turning every ordinary action into a deliberate step toward clarity and quiet vindication. The morning unfolded with a quiet rhythm, sunlight tracing patterns across the polished hardwood floors as Eleanor Hayes moved through the house with calm deliberation, her hands adjusting items that had been slightly out of place without drawing attention to the intention behind them. Each movement was purposeful, ordinary, but beneath the surface, she was observing, noting, cataloging the subtle cues that hinted at deception. She filled the teapot with water and placed it on the stove, steam rising slowly as the liquid heated, the kitchen carrying the warm scent of brewing tea. On the counter lay a neat stack of envelopes and notes, carefully ordered to appear like everyday correspondence, but each contained information Eleanor had quietly collected over the past several weeks, small pieces of evidence that pointed to behaviors she had begun to question. She walked past the living room, straightening a cushion, adjusting the angle of a lamp, the kind of gestures that seemed habitual to anyone else, but to Eleanor carried the weight of her attentiveness and patience. From the window, she could see the driveway, and she noted the position of the cars, the subtle movements in the garden, all seemingly mundane. Yet she knew that awareness of patterns often revealed intentions. She carried a tray to the dining table, setting it carefully, aligning the plates and silverware precisely, lighting a single candle for effect, not celebration, letting the ambience suggest normalcy while she mentally reviewed the details of what she had observed. Each sip of tea was deliberate, a moment to pause and consider the actions and reactions she had witnessed, the changes in tone, the micro-expressions that might escape notice but had not escaped her. Eleanor allowed herself a small, private acknowledgement of satisfaction at her own composure, the quiet confidence that came from experience and a clear mind, from observing without being observed in return. The house remained still, the sounds of a typical morning, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds, forming a backdrop against which Eleanor moved with silent purpose, her steps measured, her gaze scanning the rooms for subtle anomalies. She thought back on conversations she had had, noting the words that had seemed ordinary but now, in context, hinted at deeper agendas, small comments about schedules, casual remarks about household responsibilities, the occasional glance that lasted just a moment too long. Eleanor opened a notebook and made careful notes, each entry succinct, factual, organized, the act itself a reminder of her methodical approach and the advantage that preparation provided. She moved to the window once more, looking out at the morning light reflecting off the grass, the garden in spring bloom, and felt a steadying clarity, a resolve that would guide the interactions ahead. Every detail mattered, from the placement of a chair to the alignment of a table setting, each contributing to the careful orchestration of awareness and observation that Eleanor had maintained, a silent power, a readiness that her family could not perceive, but that ensured she would respond with intelligence and poise when the moment required. The afternoon sunlight shifted through the kitchen blinds, casting long, golden stripes across the countertop as Eleanor Hayes continued her quiet inspection of the space, her movements calm and purposeful. Each drawer she opened, each surface she adjusted, was done with precision, her eyes scanning for anomalies that might reveal a pattern she had not yet discerned. The teapot was now warm, a gentle steam rising in the soft light, mingling with the faint aroma of herbs Eleanor had chosen to steep, subtle yet comforting. She carried a small notebook with her, jotting down details in neat, methodical handwriting, observations that seemed inconsequential but were in fact pieces of a larger puzzle. She paused to straighten the photographs on the wall, each frame depicting moments of family life, and noted the expressions and postures, how gestures she had once trusted now seemed layered with intent. Eleanor moved to the dining table, checking the alignment of the plates and silverware once more, making minor adjustments that would go unnoticed, but gave her a sense of order and control over the environment. The house was still, the only sounds the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant hum of traffic outside, a rhythm that underscored the deliberate pace of her thoughts. She recalled previous gatherings, times when she had provided care and support without hesitation, the unspoken labor that had been absorbed as ordinary, and recognized the subtle shifts in attitude from those she trusted most, moments that had hinted at underlying agendas. Eleanor allowed herself a small, private acknowledgement of her own composure, a measured smile that reflected quiet satisfaction, not triumph, as she considered the day ahead. Every detail mattered. The placement of a chair, the way sunlight fell on a tablecloth, the angle of a lampshade, all elements that, to an unobservant eye, were mundane, but to Eleanor were cues, indicators, and opportunities. She sipped her tea slowly, noting the warmth against her hands, the faint taste of chamomile, grounding her focus as she mentally rehearsed potential conversations and outcomes, preparing herself to navigate the interactions with intelligence and poise. Outside, the garden shimmered under the afternoon sun, each petal and leaf reflecting a sense of normalcy that contrasted sharply with the undercurrent of awareness Eleanor maintained within. She moved through the rooms with quiet confidence, listening to the subtle creaks of the floors, noting the way light and shadow played across surfaces, internalizing the environment as part of her strategy. Every glance, every gesture, every small anomaly observed was cataloged and processed, forming a mental map of awareness that Eleanor knew would guide her in responding with careful precision, transforming ordinary domestic space into a stage where clarity, patience, and quiet insight held the ultimate influence. The late afternoon light shifted through the curtains, creating a soft, warm glow across the living room where Eleanor Hayes moved with the same deliberate calm she had maintained all morning. She walked slowly to the bookshelf, her fingers tracing the spines of volumes she had read many times before, each title a familiar anchor in a world that often felt unpredictable. The garden outside was still vibrant, the wind lightly rustling the leaves, a serene backdrop to the careful orchestration of her day. She arranged a small stack of papers on the coffee table, aligning them so that to anyone else it appeared as casual organization. But to Eleanor it was a visual map of the details she had been observing, subtle evidence of intentions and behaviors that had been quietly building over weeks. She adjusted a lamp, testing the angle of light across the photographs on the wall, and in that small action felt a sense of control, a grounding in the tangible, while her mind analyzed patterns of conversation, gestures, and interactions from the past several days. Eleanor moved to the kitchen to prepare a light snack, slicing fresh fruit with precision, placing each piece neatly on a plate, the ordinary motions providing a rhythm that anchored her thoughts. She paused at the window, looking out at the driveway where the cars were parked, noticing the familiar positions and imagining the subtle movements that had gone unnoticed, small gestures that might indicate a plan or intention. The quiet tick of the clock on the wall marked the passage of time, steady and unrelenting, and Eleanor sipped her tea, letting the warmth fill her hands and provide a sense of calm focus. Each observation, each minor adjustment, each deliberate action was part of a larger strategy that Eleanor had developed, a quiet readiness that would allow her to navigate interactions with clarity and poise. She recalled moments when she had been generous, trusting, and attentive, recognizing the patterns of dependence and subtle manipulation that had emerged, and felt a quiet resolve solidify within her. Every ordinary detail, from the placement of a chair to the alignment of the tablecloth, was part of the orchestration, reinforcing her awareness and preparedness. Eleanor moved through the home methodically, noting sounds, angles of light, positions of everyday objects, and storing each observation mentally for when the moment arrived to act with intelligence rather than reaction. The afternoon sun continued to shift, and Eleanor allowed herself a brief moment to close her eyes, drawing strength from the stillness, from the deliberate control of her environment, knowing that patience and preparation were as much a part of her plan as any action she might take. The house felt alive with quiet anticipation, each element under Eleanor's observation, ready to serve as a backdrop to the unfolding understanding and quiet power she maintained, her composure unshaken, her insight precise, her readiness absolute. Evening settled softly over the Hayes residence, the sunlight fading and giving way to a gentle, amber glow that filled the rooms with warmth and calm. Eleanor Hayes moved through the house with deliberate care, carrying a tray with freshly brewed tea, placing it on the side table next to the armchair she favored. The subtle steam rose, curling in the last rays of light, a quiet signal of routine and normalcy, though beneath that calm surface, Eleanor's mind was active, reviewing every detail she had observed throughout the day. She straightened a few magazines on the coffee table, adjusted the angle of a lamp so that the light illuminated the space just as she intended, and as she did so, she noted the position of everyday objects that could reveal unguarded reactions when the time came. The ticking of the clock was steady, a metronome to her thoughts, each second a measured step in the rhythm of her plan. She sipped her tea slowly, allowing the warmth to anchor her focus, eyes scanning the room, noticing the subtle changes in shadow, the slight shift in the curtains as the evening breeze drifted in. Eleanor reflected on recent interactions, the seemingly innocuous conversations, the gestures and tones of voice that had been inconsistent or curious, storing each observation silently, methodically. She moved toward the window and looked out at the quiet street, noting how the light from passing cars reflected off neighboring houses, the scene ordinary, yet under her scrutiny, carrying patterns, potential clues. The house itself felt alive with small sounds, the gentle hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of a floorboard as the evening chill settled, the distant barking of a dog, and Eleanor cataloged each, integrating them into her mental map of readiness. She returned to the kitchen, rearranging a few dishes from earlier, the motions precise, calm, almost ritualistic, a visible demonstration of her focus and control. She allowed herself a private smile, not from triumph, but from composure, the satisfaction of knowing that every detail, every movement, every quiet observation contributed to the awareness and preparation she had cultivated. The air carried the subtle scent of her tea and the lingering aroma of freshly baked bread from the morning, grounding her as she prepared for the coming evening, anticipating conversations, observing body language, the potential for revelation. Eleanor moved through the rooms with quiet confidence, each gesture measured, each motion a silent statement of awareness, a preparation that required no words yet communicated her clarity and readiness. Every ordinary action, the alignment of a chair, the placement of a newspaper, the arrangement of a cushion, was part of a strategy of patience, observation, and quiet influence, transforming the familiar household into a space where calm insight would hold the ultimate authority as the evening unfolded and the moments of interaction approached their measured climax. The sun had fully set, leaving the house bathed in the soft glow of interior lighting that Eleanor Hayes had arranged just so, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere that belied the careful calculation behind it. She moved through the rooms with quiet assurance, checking that everything remained in place, the cushions aligned, the table settings perfect, each detail contributing to the perception of ordinary domestic tranquility. The gentle hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock, and the occasional creak of the floor under her own weight were all part of a rhythm she understood intimately, a rhythm she could manipulate by her mere presence and awareness. Eleanor paused by the window, looking out at the darkened street where streetlights cast long reflections across the pavement, and noted the subtle movements of shadows from neighboring homes, the ordinary activity of evening providing a backdrop to her internal observations. She returned to the dining area, where a small selection of tea and refreshments awaited, placing each item with meticulous care, not for spectacle, but as a consistent measure of control, maintaining the calm exterior that would draw others into a sense of normalcy. Her mind reviewed every interaction of the day, every word spoken, every glance exchanged, mapping out intentions and responses with the precision of someone who had learned to read between lines and actions rather than rely solely on speech. The house felt alive with subtle cues, a dialogue of silence and movement that Eleanor translated into understanding and foresight, each element a potential key to revealing motives when the time came. She allowed herself a moment to sit, tea in hand, the warmth steadying her, her eyes scanning the familiar environment for the smallest deviations, the tiniest indicators that might suggest impatience, uncertainty, or a reveal of truth from her family. The garden outside reflected the moonlight on its foliage, ordinary yet vivid, and Eleanor absorbed the serenity of the evening while mentally rehearsing how she would handle each subtle test, each interaction, each unspoken challenge. She felt the calm strength that came from preparation, from patience, and from an intimate knowledge of her surroundings and of the people she had long observed. Every adjustment she made, every step she took, every careful observation became part of a silent orchestration that ensured she would maintain the upper hand, ready to transform the ordinary routines of the evening into a canvas upon which insight, foresight, and measured response would reveal the quiet power she had cultivated. Eleanor rose, her movements slow and deliberate, walking through the rooms once more, aware of the shadows and light, the placement of objects, and the quiet potential of each subtle interaction, knowing that her patience and preparation would soon intersect with opportunity to quietly, decisively, and flawlessly demonstrate the awareness and composure that defined her presence in the home. The house had settled into the quiet of late evening, the glow from the lamps soft against the walls, casting long, warm shadows that moved subtly as Eleanor Hayes walked through each room, her steps deliberate and measured. She paused by the sideboard, arranging a few small decorative items, ensuring symmetry, the action precise yet unobtrusive, part of the rhythm she had maintained all day. The faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of a car passing on the street outside punctuated the calm, and Eleanor absorbed the stillness, letting it sharpen her awareness and focus. She moved to the dining table, checking once more the alignment of silverware and the neatness of the tablecloth, small details that reinforced the controlled environment she had cultivated. Sipping her tea, Eleanor allowed her gaze to travel across the room, noting the angles of light, the positions of objects, and the subtle indications of human behavior she had observed throughout the day, storing each mental note carefully. The quiet of the house was matched by the steady rhythm of her thoughts, reviewing interactions, conversations, gestures, and tones of voice, interpreting each with precision, recognizing patterns, and anticipating potential reactions. She reflected on moments when she had trusted implicitly, the care and attention she had provided to her family over the years, and how subtle manipulations had begun to emerge in ways she now understood. Eleanor allowed herself a moment of calm acknowledgement. The small smile she offered herself quiet, restrained, reflecting satisfaction in her own composure and the careful orchestration of her observations. She moved through the rooms once more, noticing the smallest variations in light and shadow, the subtle movement of curtains in the breeze, the faint echo of footsteps, each element integrated into her internal map of understanding. As the night deepened, Eleanor stood near the window, looking out at the quiet street and the softly illuminated gardens of the neighbors, drawing a sense of perspective and control from the ordinary environment, knowing that preparation and awareness had set the stage for the interactions she had planned. Each object, each placement, each minor adjustment was part of a careful strategy, invisible to anyone else but crucial to her understanding and foresight. She moved back toward the living room, settling lightly into her favorite chair, cup in hand, observing the house as if it were a living entity, every creak, hum, and shadow a participant in the unfolding day, her patience and insight quietly asserting the control and composure she had cultivated. The evening air carried a soft scent of the flowers from the garden, mingling with the lingering aroma of tea, grounding her in the present while her mind remained alert and prepared, every movement and detail accounted for, every interaction anticipated, ensuring that her quiet strength and awareness would guide the moments yet to come, and that every subtlety of the evening would reflect the careful, measured patience she had maintained throughout. The night had deepened, and the house was wrapped in a gentle, muted silence, the faint glow of lamps casting elongated shadows across the polished floors and familiar furnishings. Eleanor Hayes sat in her favorite chair, a warm cup of tea in her hands, and let the quiet settle around her. Each sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the subtle creak of a floorboard, the distant barking of a dog, registering as part of the evening's measured rhythm. She allowed herself a slow, deliberate breath, noting the weight and texture of the night, the subtle shift in air temperature as the windows remained slightly ajar, the soft rustle of leaves outside responding to the occasional evening breeze. Her gaze moved methodically across the living room, noting the alignment of objects, the positions of decorative items, the small details that could easily go unnoticed but were essential to maintaining a sense of balance and control in the home. Each observation was cataloged internally, quietly processed, part of a larger mental framework that Eleanor had developed over weeks of careful attention, ensuring that she was aware of all nuances and undercurrents in her environment. She reflected on the series of interactions from earlier in the day, the words exchanged, the gestures and tones, and the subtle hints of intentions she had quietly gathered, forming a coherent understanding of patterns and behaviors that would inform her responses. Eleanor allowed herself a moment of reflection on her own patience and composure, the deliberate restraint she had exercised, understanding that power often lay not in the immediate display of reaction, but in the careful orchestration of awareness and anticipation. She took another sip of tea, the warmth filling her hands and providing a sense of focus and grounding, allowing her mind to drift briefly over the ordinary details of the home, the smoothness of the tablecloth, the gentle sway of the curtains, the faint scent of flowers from the garden that had been brought inside for the evening. As she set the cup down, Eleanor's attention returned to the subtle movements and patterns she had observed in her family members over time, the quiet indicators of motives, the slight inconsistencies in behavior that she now recognized as part of a larger picture. She moved slowly to the window, looking out at the quiet street illuminated by streetlights, and allowed the calmness of the scene to reinforce her sense of control, knowing that observation and patience had positioned her with clarity and insight. Every ordinary object, every shadow, every minor motion in the house was part of her awareness, contributing to a mental map that ensured she could respond with precision, understanding, and measured authority. Eleanor felt the quiet satisfaction of a day spent fully attentive, every detail accounted for, every subtlety absorbed, and the confidence that her composed presence, her observation, and her strategic patience would guide her family interactions in the moments to come, preserving her dignity and the quiet strength she had cultivated over the years.